Here's how to tie the Tautline hitch. Start by wrapping the free end around the object. Then go around the standing end twice in the direction of the loop. Now take the end and cross over and do another turn in the same direction. And finally tug the end underneath itself like this. It's a very simple slide and grip knot that you can use anytime you need to tension the guy lines of your tent or your tarp, or if you need to make a close hanging line. If it still slides when you pull on it, you can do 3 turns or even 4 turns before finally finishing the knot. This will make it harder to slide, but it will have much more friction. And that's how a finished tautline hitch should look like. Here's how to tie the double overhand stopper knot. Form a loop at the end of the rope, then take the end and go through another time and tighten the knot. On the finished knot, the rope should be parallel on one side and form an X on the other. But if you'll be tying it after a figure 8 follow through or other knots, there's another technique that works better. Put your thumb on the rope and go over it with the end of the rope. Now go over it once again, but this time form an X. And lastly, take out your thumb and put the end of the rope through the loops that you just made. This knot is considered to be one of the best stopper knots because it's strong, it's easy to tie and check, and it's somewhat easy to untie as well. It's most commonly used for securing other knots like the figure 8 follow through and the figure 8 bend. But you can also use this knot to connect 2 ropes together by making 2 of these knots in the opposite directions. In this variation, it's called the double fisherman knot. Here's how to tie the 2 half hitches knot. Start by taking the end of the rope and going around the support. Then go around the standing end and through this loop formed over here and tighten the knot. And then proceed by tying another identical half hitch in the same direction and finally tighten it. It isn't the most secure knot, but it does work well with most types of non-slippery ropes. You can use it pretty much any time you need to attach a rope to a ring or a post. But if you want a stronger knot, then it can be improved in 2 ways. The first way is to do 1 additional turn around the post before tying the 2 half hitches. This makes it much stronger. And in this case, it's called the round turn and 2 half hitches knot. The other one is to just tie another half hitch after the second one. In this case, it's called the 3 half hitches knot. Here's how to tie the square knot. Start by placing both rope ends next to one another and then wrapping the second one around the first one. Now again, place both of them next to one another and wrap the right one around the left one, like this. Finish, pull both ropes while holding the rope ends, then release them and pull again. Make sure to leave the ends rather long because this knot tends to slip if pulled with a lot of force. For very simple applications, this knot is secure enough to connect 2 shorter ropes. If you want something more secure, you could do 2 turns around each rope instead of 1. But once tightened and put under load, it becomes pretty much a big mess that's very hard to untie. A much better solution would be to tie a figure 8 bend knot instead, which we covered in another video. Here's how to tie both versions of the slip knot, other called the slipped overhand knot. If used for knitting or creating a snare, then tie it using the first technique. Create a pretty large loop and then tie a simple overhand knot around the standing end. So the main idea behind it is that if you pull on the standing end, the loop will tighten itself and keep tight around the object. But if you want to create a quick release stopper knot, then use the second technique. Simply create a bight at the end of the rope and then with it tie a simple overhand knot. This will act as a stopper knot, so you can tie it after other knots to make them more secure. And if you want to untie it, simply pull on the end and the knot will come undone by itself very easily. Here's how to tie the noose knot. It creates a loop near the end of the rope, which tightens as you pull it. Start by creating a loop near the end of the rope. Then put the standing end in front of it and push it through. Finally, tighten the resulting overhand knot. But you can also tie it using another technique. Create a large loop near the end of the rope and then tie a simple overhand knot around the standing end like this. This knot is often used as a snare for catching small wild animals. It tightens very easily and it keeps a good amount of pressure, which reduces the chances of the animal escaping. Here's how to tie the Clove hitch, which is one of the most useful knots to know in everyday situations. To tie it, take the end of the rope and go around the post on the right side, then go around it once again, but this time on the left side, and finally tug the end of the rope underneath this strand over here and tighten it. But also make sure to dress the knot neatly together so that there's no slack when you pull on it. It isn't the most secure hitch, but it's pretty strong and you can tie it very easily. But what's even better, you can untie it very easily when you don't need it anymore. If you want to make it more secure, you can tie another half hitch around it here in the front. Instead of a half hitch, a lot of people like to do another Clove hitch on the top, but I found that the bottom Clove hitch usually tends to seize up pretty badly if you do that. Here's how to tie a figure 8 follow-through knot, also sometimes referred to as the rewoven figure of 8 knot. Start by creating a figure 8 knot at the end of your rope. Take a rather long piece of rope, then go under, up, under, and through the final opening. The finished knot should look something like this, and it should have a rather long piece of rope at the end of it. Now take the end of the rope and go over the attachment point that you'll be using. Now you need to retrace the figure of 8 that you just made, just in the other direction. To make sure that it's tied correctly, make sure that it has 3 sets of parallel ropes on each side. It's a very strong knot that's most commonly used in climbing for attaching to the harness, but you can also use it anytime you need to create a strong connection to a fixed object. The knot tightens by itself when it's pulled, so it doesn't require a stopper knot. But a lot of people, especially climbers, like to add another double overhand stopper knot for additional safety. Here's how to tie the Zeppelin bend knot. Start by creating a bight at the end of each rope and create 2 loops. The first one should be facing downwards and the other one should be facing upwards. Now take the one that's facing upwards and place it over the one that's facing downwards. Take the end of the first rope and go through the place where both of them intersect. Now take the end of the other rope and do the same thing, just from the other end. To tighten this knot, pull on each of these ropes individually from all directions until the knot feels very tight. You can use this knot whenever you need to connect 2 ropes together because it's very strong and it's also very easy to untie. It's often used by climbers, mountaineers, arborists, and in similar applications. To learn, here's how to tie the stevedore stopper knot. It forms a pretty big knot at the end of the rope, which you can use to keep the rope from slipping through rings, anchors, and other knots. Start by creating a loop near the end of the rope. Then go around it once, a second time, and finally go through this loop. Tighten by pulling the rope in the opposite directions and then pulling the rope while holding the knot with your other free hand. The finished knot should look something like this. Make sure to keep the end pretty long to account for slippage because as you pull the rope, the end will become a bit shorter. Due to its large profile, this knot is very commonly used in boating, in sailing, and for hauling very heavy loads. You can also use this knot when creating a swing by drilling a hole inside the plank and then tying it in the rope to keep it from slipping through the hole.